Imagine a timeline. But I don't want you to picture the usual high school history timeline, with the wars and the kings. I want you to picture a timeline of sound. The noises coming out of human mouths. We are dialing the clock back 4,500 years. We're going to the absolute bedrock of recorded human speech.
It's a staggering amount of time to try and wrap your head around. I mean, we are looking at a continuous, unbroken chain of linguistic DNA.
Right.
It stretches from clay tablets in ancient Mesopotamia, written by people who had just invented the concept of writing, right up to a text message sent in Cairo or Jerusalem this morning.
That's the scale. And today we're unpacking a heavyweight topic, the Semitic languages. The names Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic. But the goal of this deep dive isn't just to list languages. We're zooming out.
Way out.
To see the massive family tree they belong to, something called Afro-Asiatic.
And more importantly, this is really a detective story. It's about how we know what we know.
Exactly. Because these languages were lost for thousands of years. So we're going to look at how humanity cracked the codes of lost scripts. But also, and this is the really cool part, how ancient scribes, people in Babylon in 2000 BC, were analyzing their own grammar.
Long before linguistics was even a word. Our roadmap for this is a dense and incredibly detailed chapter by Edward Lipieski called From Semitic to Afro-Asiatic, A History of Linguistic Research.
Okay, so let's get into it. The word Semitic, we hear it all the time, usually in a very specific modern context.
Yeah.
But if we strip all that away, where does that label actually come from?
It's surprisingly recent, actually, from a scientific point of view. It pops up in 1781. A German scholar, August Ludwig von Schlitzer, he coined it.
And he was just reading the Bible?
Pretty much. He borrowed it from Shem, one of Noah's sons. The working theory at the time was just that the people speaking these languages were, the descendants of Shem.
So it's a theological category first, not a linguistic one.
Yeah, precisely. It was a biblical reference that just stuck. For a long time, the larger superfamily was called Hamito-Semitic, bringing in another of Noah's sons, Ham, for the African languages.
But that term is out of favor now.
Yeah, it has some baggage. It kind of implies a neat binary split that doesn't really exist in the data. So today, linguists prefer Afro-Asiatic.
Which makes a lot more sense. It tells you exactly where these languages live. And this family is just massive.
Enormous. It covers 5, possibly 6 major branches. You've got Semitic, of course. Then there's Libico-Berber all across North Africa. You have Ancient Egyptian.
The language of the pharaohs.
Then Cushitic in East Africa, which is a huge group itself, with languages like Somali.
And then there's Chadic, right, which pushes all the way down into sub-Saharan Africa.
Correct. Chadic has about 150 languages, the most famous being Hausa. And there's still a debate about a 6th member, Meroitic, the language of ancient Kush in Sudan.
Okay, so just visualize that map for a second. The Middle East, North Africa, the Horn of Africa, parts of West Africa. Now, here's the bit from Lipieski that really stopped me.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say.
When I think Semitic, I assume the origin point, the homeland, is the Middle East, Mesopotamia, the Levant.
That's the natural assumption. It's where all the famous ancient civilizations were.
But Lipieski says probably not. The consensus is shifting. The cradle of these languages probably wasn't in Asia at all.
It was the Sahara.
The Sahara. But wait, the Sahara is a desert. It's not exactly a place you'd think could launch a huge linguistic family.
It's a desert now, but you have to wind the clock back. We're talking about the Green Sahara period, maybe 5,000 to 10,000 years ago.
I thought it was a savanna.
It was wet, it was full of life, and as the climate shifted and the desertification started, those people had to move. Some went east into the Nile Valley, some went further east into Arabia and Mesopotamia.
So the Semitic languages are basically an African migration that took root in Asia.
Exactly. I mean, you can see this in the genetic distance between the languages. Semitic and Libico-Berber are like close cousins. Think German and English.
Okay.
But Chadic, that's the distant cousin who moved away thousands of years ago. The separation is maybe 5,000 years or even more.
That really does flip the mental map we use for history.
Yeah.
Let's zoom in on that Semitic branch, though, because that's where we have the written records. We have to start with, well, the heavyweight champion of the ancient world, Akkadian.
The grandfather of them all. Akkadian is the language of the Babylonians and the Assyrians. We have documents in Akkadian going back to 2400 BC.
And this is the language written in cuneiform, those little wedge shapes pressed into wet clay.
Yes, although they actually borrowed that writing system from the Sumerians, who spoke a completely unrelated language. But Akkadian is so crucial because it was the first international superpower language.
The lingua franca.
Before Greek, before Latin, before English, there was Akkadian. In the 2nd millennium BC, if you were a pharaoh in Egypt writing a letter to a king in modern-day Turkey, you didn't write in Egyptian.
You wrote in Akkadian.
It was the language of diplomacy, of high culture.
But languages have life cycles. Akkadian died out. But there's another Semitic language that strikes me as, I don't know, the ultimate survivor. Aramaic.
Aramaic is, I mean, you could call it the cockroach of languages, and I mean that as a huge compliment.
It's incredibly resilient.
It shows up around the 9th century BC. And unlike Akkadian with its difficult cuneiform script, Aramaic used an alphabet. It was just easier to learn, easier to write.
And it spread like wildfire.
It just superseded everything. It became the language of the Persian Empire, so it was used from India to Egypt. It was the common spoken language of Judea in the 1st century.
The language of Jesus.
And this is the part that I think people don't realize. It's not a dead language.
Not at all.
It's been attested for 3,000 continuous years. There are villages today like Malula in Syria and communities in Turkey and Iraq where forms of Aramaic are still the mother tongue. It is a living link to the Iron Age.
That is just incredible. Now, I want to clarify something about the Arabian Peninsula. I think most people, myself included, just assume that if a language is from there, it must be a dialect of Arabic.
A very common misconception. But the source is really emphatic on this. There's a group of languages called Modern South Arabian.
Like Mary and Sokotri.
Exactly, spoken in parts of Yemen and Oman. And these aren't just weird Arabic.
No, they're distinct languages on the family tree. A speaker of modern Arabic cannot understand a speaker of Mary.
It'd be like a Spanish speaker trying to understand Romanian. They share a root, but they've drifted apart over millennia. These South Arabian languages are like living fossils. They preserve grammatical features that Arabic lost a long, long time ago.
And we can't forget the African connection inside the Semitic branch itself, the Ethio-Semitic languages.
Right, this is a fascinating sub-branch. The classic example is Ge'ez.
Which functions a bit like Latin in Europe, right? It's a liturgical language.
Right. Exactly. It's the language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Nobody speaks it day to day anymore, but it is the ancestor of modern languages like Amharic and Tigrinya. It shows you this back and forth movement across the Red Sea. It wasn't a one-way street.
So we have this huge interconnected web. But what I found most stimulating in Lipinski's chapter wasn't just the languages, but the history of studying them. We have this idea that linguistics is a modern science.
And Lipinski just completely dismantles that arrogance.
He takes us back to the scribal schools of the 3rd millennium BC.
This is one of my favorite parts. We're talking 2400 BC, scribes in a place called Ebla in modern Syria. They had to learn Sumerian, the old prestige language, but they spoke Eblaic. So what do?
They made dictionaries.
Bilingual dictionaries. Lists of Sumerian words with their own language next to them. This is the birth of comparative linguistics. And later, at a site called Ugarit, they found quadrilingual dictionaries.
4 languages.
4 columns: Sumerian, Babylonian, Hurrian, and Ugaritic.
Just imagine the intellectual sophistication that requires. They weren't just translating. They were analyzing the structure of meaning across 4 different cultures.
And they went beyond vocabulary. The source shows how Old Babylonian scholars developed actual grammatical terms. They had a theory for their language.
This part blew my mind. They had terms for tenses, but they used these metaphors that are actually really intuitive.
Right. They used the word maru, which literally means fat or slow, for what we'd call the imperfect tense actions that are ongoing, continuous.
Heavy.
And for the past tense, they used hamtu, which means rapid or hot. Actions that are done, finished, quick.
Fat time and hot time. That's such a vivid way to feel an action. I am walking is fat, it takes up space. I walked is hot, it happened in a flash.
It's brilliant. And Lipinski notes they even identified vowels. They had broken their speech down into its basic sounds, into phonemes, 4,000 years ago.
So this analysis continued, but the motivation shifted in the Middle Ages. It became less about administration and more about God.
Correct. If you believe a text is the literal word of God, the stakes for understanding the grammar become, well, infinite. You cannot make a mistake.
And this happened in the Islamic world first.
Yes. As Islam spread, you had millions of non-Arabs converting. They needed to read the Quran, but they were making mistakes, corrupting the language. This led to a huge drive to systematize Arabic grammar, with scholars like Sibawayhi in the 8th century.
And Jewish scholars were doing the exact same thing with Hebrew.
Parallel tracks. Scholars like Sadia Gaon analyzing the Hebrew Bible. And this leads to a massive breakthrough around the year 1000 AD by a scholar named Judah ben David Hayyuj.
The tri-radical discovery.
It sounds technical, but it's the absolute key to the entire Semitic system. Hayyuj realized that almost every word in Hebrew, and Arabic for that matter, is built on a skeleton of 3 consonants.
Can you give us a clear example of how that works?
Sure. Take the root, KTB. Those 3 sounds carry the abstract idea of writing.
Okay, KTB is writing.
If you slot in certain vowels, you get katab, he wrote. Change the vowels, add a prefix, you get yiktob, he will write. Change them again, you get kitab, book, or katib, writer.
So the 3 consonants are the DNA, and the vowels are just the clothing you put on them to tell us who, when, and what.
That's a perfect way to put it. Hayyuj cracked that code 1,000 years ago. And that is still, to this day, exactly how we teach these languages.
So the internal codes were cracked by native speakers. But then you have the external codes, the scripts that were completely forgotten. This brings us to the 19th century, the era of the Great Decipherment.
This really is the golden age of philology. You have these silent monuments, Egyptian obelisks, Babylonian reliefs, covered in writing that no one could read for almost 2,000 years.
And everyone knows the story of the Rosetta Stone. But how did Champollion actually do it?
It was pure logic. He had the stone with Greek, which he could read, and hieroglyphs. He saw the name of the pharaoh Ptolemy in the Greek text. He then looked at the hieroglyphs and saw a group of symbols circled by an oval, a cartouche.
And he guessed, that must be the name.
Right. But the real breakthrough was with Cleopatra. He found another inscription with a cartouche he suspected was Cleopatra. He compared the 2. Ptolemy and Cleopatra shared the sounds P, L, and O. He looked at the symbols. The symbol for P in Ptolemy matched the P in Cleopatra. The L matched. The O matched.
That's the smoking gun. It proved the pictures weren't just mystical ideas, they were phonetic. They stood for sounds.
And once he had that foothold, the whole system just unraveled.
But while Champollion was getting his victory lap, there was a much messier situation with cuneiform. People didn't believe the scholars.
It looked arbitrary. So the Royal Asiatic Society in London staged a kind of a put-up-or-shut-up moment in 1857.
The exam.
They took a new inscription of the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser I. They copied it and sent it to 4 different scholars, Rawlinson, Talbot, Hinks, and Oppert. They were basically sent to separate rooms and told, translate this, no cheating.
It's like a high-stakes standardized test for geniuses.
The tension must have been incredible. If they came back with 4 different stories, the whole field would have been a laughingstock.
But they didn't.
No. When the envelopes were opened, the translations matched. Not word for word, of course, but the meaning, the dates, the names, the events, all identical. That was the moment the world accepted that the code was broken.
We could finally hear the voices of ancient Babylon. Then, fast forward to 1929, they find a site called Ugarit, find more clay tablets. But this time, they cracked the code in just 1 year. Why was that so much easier?
It was a technological leap in writing itself. Akkadian cuneiform is a syllabary. It has hundreds of signs, a nightmare to decode. But Ugaritic, the scholars just counted the signs, there were only 30.
And if you only have 30 signs, you know immediately what you're dealing with.
It has to be an alphabet. The math doesn't work for anything else. Once they realized it was an alphabetic script and a language related to Hebrew, they deciphered it in record time.
It's amazing to think about writing as a technology that gets optimized. 600 signs down to 30 is a massive user experience upgrade.
Absolutely.
Now, Lepieski's chapter doesn't just give us history. He ends with some deep linguistic theories that are a bit mind-bending. There's this idea by Benno Landsberger from 1926 about the root theory.
This is where we go from how language works to where language comes from.
We just established that Semitic roots are triradical, 3 letters. But Landsberger looked deeper.
He noticed a pattern. He took Hebrew verbs with similar meanings, words like separate, tear, split, break. In Hebrew, that's parad, param, paras.
I'll start with PR.
Exactly. He found that the 3rd letter changed, but that core PR sound stayed constant.
So what does that imply?
His theory was that the 3-letter system is actually an upgrade, that originally the ancestors of these languages might have been biconsonantal, just 2 sounds.
And why PR?
Think about the sound. Per, par. It's explosive. It's the sound of your lips popping open. It suggests an onomatopoeic origin, that maybe the earliest human speech in this family wasn't abstract at all. It was built on short, punchy sounds that mimic the physical reality of breaking or cutting something.
That is wild. It's like you can see the DNA of the language and the primitive creature it evolved from. You can hear the sound effects of the Stone Age hidden inside modern grammar.
And there's another fossil hidden in the grammar, which scholars like Diakonoff pointed out. It's a concept called ergativity.
Okay, you have to explain this simply because ergativity is one of those words that makes people's eyes glaze over.
It's about how a culture views action. In English, we're obsessed with the subject. I broke the window. I am the master of that sentence. But in an ergative system, the focus shifts. It distinguishes between an agent, the one forcefully doing something, and the patient, the one experiencing the action.
So how would an ergative language say, the window broke?
It wouldn't necessarily look for a culprit right away. It structures the world more around the state of the object changing.
So it's less about who did it and more about what happened.
In a way, yes, and Afro-Asiatic languages show traces of this. It suggests that the ancestors of these speakers viewed the world not just in terms of subject dominates object, but in a more nuanced relationship of cause and experiencer. It's a fossilized worldview preserved in the syntax.
It really drives home the point that language isn't just a lilt of words for things. It's a framework for reality.
It absolutely is.
We've covered a huge amount of ground today, from the Green Sahara to the scribal schools of Babylon to the Victorian code breakers. When you step back and look at Lipieski's work, what's the big takeaway for you?
For me, it's the realization that this field is not done. We tend to think of history as a closed book. We found the tablets, we read them, end of story.
But that's not true.
Not at all. We are still finding new things. Look at the Saqalhanic scripts. These were inscriptions found in Oman only in the 1990s. We're still finding new scripts, new data points that challenge our family tree.
We're still writing the history of how we learn to write.
We are. And Lipieski ends with a really important note of caution. He warns against mass lexical comparison, basically, just grabbing words from all these different languages and trying to force matches. He says it's hazardous, premature.
Because we still don't know enough about how the sounds changed over 5,000 years.
Exactly. And that leaves me with a final thought to end on.
Lay it on us.
If our understanding is still so fragile that top scholars are afraid to compare vocabulary across the whole family, what are we missing?
It's a big question.
Think about it. We have these massive cultures. Ancient Egypt, Babylon, the cultures of the Horn of Africa, we know they're related. But if we haven't cracked the code on the deepest vocabulary connections, what major links between human cultures, between Africa and Asia, are just staring us in the face right now, but we haven't found the right dictionary yet to see them?
We're staring at the pieces of a puzzle, and we don't even know how big the puzzle actually is.
Exactly.
Well, that is all the time we have for this deep dive. A huge thank you to the work of Edward Lipieski for guiding us through this labyrinth.
It was a pleasure to explore it.
And thank you for listening. Keep asking questions, keep looking for the roots, and we'll see you on the next dive.